Good day, Brother Rawl here. I'm just going to record a quick video about the silence in heaven. There seems to be a lot of confusion as to what the sign of silence in heaven means, and many people are taking it to mean that we're already in the seventh seal. And as we go through this, I'm going to first start off by explaining the creation of the earth, and which is broken down into 7 spiritual creation periods and 7 periods of physical creation. And then just a quick review of the opening of the Sith Seal, the opening events, the moon, the earthquake, the meteorites. And then we'll talk a little bit about the significance of the lost tribes, but the main focus will be on the silence in heaven. And what does it actually mean from a scriptural perspective? So first of all, God has a 2-week plan for this earth. As we know, He's created worlds without number. And the first 7 days of 7 periods of 1,000 years was spiritual creation, was basically solely spiritual creation. And then the last 7,000 years, which we are currently in, is a physical creation. Now I've got an expectant mother there because we participate in that physical creation. So let's get into it. So there's 3 recorded scriptures of the creation of the earth and the things that happened. Now, first of all, we'll go have a quick read in Abraham. See if this will come up for us. And let me just move this around a little bit. Okay, so in Abraham chapter 4, if you read the chapter heading, it says, "And God's plan of the creation of the earth and all life thereon. Their plans for the 6 days of creation are set forth." Then it says, "And let the gods go down, and they went down in the beginning, that is, the gods, and organized and formed the heavens and the earth. And after it formed, it was empty and desolate, and there was darkness upon the earth. Then they created the day, and they created the night, created the expanses, they created the waters." Verse 11, "And God said, Let us prepare the earth to bring forth every herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, its own likeness upon the earth. And it was even as they had ordered." So all the gods did is they prepared the earth to receive grass, and to receive the seeds, and to be able to receive plant life. God's organized the earth and created the lights and the expanse in heaven, darkness, same thing. Verse 21, "And the gods prepared the waters that they might bring forth great whales, and every living creature that moveth upon the water, to bring forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after their kind. And the gods saw that they would be obeyed, and their plan was good." So they prepared the earth, they prepared the waters to bring forth mammal life, and all forms of life. And it also says here that they would reproduce after their own kind. So there's no evolution because they reproduced after their own kind. And God went and watched, and they saw that they would be obeyed. So they put things in plan for them to be obeyed. And the same thing, so it continues. So now we move on to Abraham 5, and it says, "And the gods concluded upon the 7th time, because the works of the 7th time would rest from all their works. And the gods counseled among themselves to form and sanctify it. And thus the decision at the time that they counseled among themselves to form the heavens and the earth. And gods came down and formed the generation of heaven and earth. When they were formed in the day that gods formed the earth and the heavens in the 7th time period." Right? "And all that which they had said concerning the plants of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the gods had not caused it to rain upon the earth." Verse 7, "And the gods formed man out of the dust from the ground, and took his spirit that is in man, that is the man's spirit, and put it into him, and breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living soul." So again, in the 7th period, man was created, physically created. Moses, which I read on my previous video, right? Same thing, it talks about creating in Moses 2, creating the earth and the animals and everything. And then verse 5, and every plant of the field before it grew on earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for I, Lord, created all things which I have spoken spiritually before they were naturally upon the earth. And again, go away. Right, verse 7, and the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living soul, the first flesh upon the earth, the first man. Also, nevertheless, all things were before created, but spiritually were they created and made according to my word. So Adam was created, and he was the first flesh upon the earth, and he was the first physical thing created on the earth. Now we know in Moses, it says, behold, this is my work and my glory, to bring to pass immortality and eternal life for man. So God's full purpose, the main purpose, is to bring to pass immortality and eternal life for man. There's no requirement to create trees and grass before man was created. Okay, let's have a quick look. Now we can go to Genesis. Same thing, chapter 1, creates the earth, he creates the great whales, the grass, and the seeds after their kind. Bring forth living waters, the great whales. If we go to chapter 2, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. So what we know here is that God, right, that everything was created first spiritually, right? Man was in the, if you read in Doctrine and Covenants 93:29, says, man was also in the beginning with God, intelligence, other words, light or truth, was not created nor made, and neither indeed can be. So what we're looking at is we're all intelligences, we've all lived forever, we've always been alive, and God creates spiritual bodies and puts that intelligence in. Now we have intelligence of trees, grass, even the planets have intelligence. And God forms a spirit that will be suitable for that type of intelligence, and then gives it a spiritual body. And then when it comes down to earth, it gets opportunity to receive a physical body. Just a few quick quotes from early church leaders. They taught that all life forms, mankind, animals, plants have a spirit which coexists with their physical presence. Brigham Young explained that even natural landforms have a spirit, the spirit that constitutes life of everything we see. If there's life in these rocks and mountains, there is. Then there is a spirit particularly adapted to those rocks and mountains. Joseph Fielding Smith. No doubt the spirit that possesses the bodies of animals are in the similitude of their bodies. In other words, the bodies of animals conform to the spirit which possesses them, which existed before they were placed on the earth naturally. Then there is some measure of intelligence in members of the animal kingdom. And it goes on to quote that all spirit is matter, but it is more fine and more pure. Section 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants, we'll read about a bit later. Verse 45, the earth rolls upon her wings, and the sun giveth light by the moon by the day, and the moon giveth her light by night. The stars also give their light as they roll upon their wings in their glory in the midst of the power of God. So the earth has a spirit, and it actually even has a gender, it has a female spirit. There's a bit of a complicated slide here. So what I've been reading here is this first 7,000 years spiritual creations. And this red line here is when Adam was created. And Adam was created during the seventh period, during the day of rest, because all the creation up till then has only been spiritual. Right at the end of the then here we have approximately 4000 BC, the fall of Adam became temporal. Then we continue with the physical creation during that time period. If you read, as our focus is on the seals, read in Doctrine and Covenants 77 verse 12, what are we to understand by the sounding of the trumpets mentioned in the 8th chapter of Revelation? Is that we are to understand that God made the world in 6 days. On the 7th day he finished his work, sanctified it, and also formed man out of the dust of the earth. Even so, in the beginning of the 7,000 years will the Lord God sanctify the earth and complete the salvation of man. Now, this is a fourth scripture. In fact, you won't find any scripture saying anything else other than the first 6 periods was spiritual creation, and then the gods rested, and right at the end of that rest period, they created Adam's physical body. And what this section 77 is also saying, that the second coming, so this is the 7,000 years of the earth's natural existence. And if you take this yellow bar here as the year 2033, the last 1,000-year period, which will be the millennium period, the second coming occurs sometime after the 7,000 years, because Adam was also created within the day of rest. So we move on from the creation to the 6th seal, which I've got at the time as 1033 to 2033. Gives us approximately a few years, 13 years or something, before the death of Christ. Is exactly 2,000 years since the crucifixion of Christ, 2033, right? And at the opening, and prior to that, these are the events that are to occur in the 6th seal, right? It says, when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth as hair, and the moon became as blood. The stars of heaven fell to earth, even as a fig tree casts the untimely figs when you're shaken of a mighty wind. So what we read here, something happens with the moon, right? We know the moon revolves around the earth, and part of the moon is it protects the earth from asteroids coming in, from meteorites, prevents the meteorites from coming into the earth's atmosphere, the asteroids. And also the gravity of the moon has a great impact on the earth. You know, we have the tides, we have seas and heave according to the moon's cycles. I have a degree in geology and studied geology, as well as 2 other master's degrees, one in environmental management and one in remote sensing and spatial information systems. And I've studied landforms all my life, and I've studied the impacts of the moon. If you do groundwater monitoring, you see with very sensitive equipment, you see even the groundwater levels change with the moon. I remember back in 1982 in England, that a huge storm came in, a very low pressure system, and a lot of the people's basements of their houses flooded because the drop of atmospheric pressure and the water lifted. So if the moon had in any way changed its orbit, come closer to Earth or something, move further away, it would affect the gravity of the Earth. And you'll have all these things occurring. You'll have earthquakes, and might impact the sun, which we'll talk about a bit later. And the protection of the moon from these asteroids impacts as it revolves around the Earth. The gravity pulls in all the meteorites. You can look at the moon with a naked eye and you can see all the craters from impact strikes. So we look at section 88, verse 87 of the Doctrine and Covenants. It says, not many days hence, and the earth shall tremble and reel to and fro as a drunken man, and the sun shall hide its face and refuse to give light. The moon shall be bathed in blood, and the stars shall become exceedingly angry and cast themselves down as a fig that falleth from off the fig tree. This is the opening events of the 6th seal, which occurs sometime during the 1033 to 2033 period. And many people say it's occurred already, but if you look at these signs, they all occur within the same verse, and they're all related and linked to each other. Many people just go through this, go into Google, type in, oh, look at this, there was a great earthquake, yeah, somewhere in Spain, there was an earthquake there, in the Madrid fault, that was a great earthquake. Let's have a look at some of the great earthquakes that have occurred throughout history. So, first one was in the days of Peleg. It said, unto Eber were born two sons, and the name one was Peleg. For in his days the earth was divided, and his brother name was Joktan. So what we know from geology is that the earth was all together in one solid land mass to the south, and then as time progressed, as you know, during the days of Peleg, the earth was divided and split up and moved around into its current position, very similar to this quick animation we have here of the different continents as they're moving around. You can see India is pretty active and crashes up into the Eurasia continent, and that's where we get the Himalayas being formed. Okay, so going back to our presentation, actually we read in section 133 of the Doctrine and Covenants says, he shall command the great deep, and it shall be driven back into the north countries, and the islands shall become one land. Now think of that great earthquake. Think of the destruction that would have been caused. Think of the great movement of the earth, right? The whole Earth's axis would have wobbled and everything would have been in complete chaos. There would have been a lot of noise, a lot of things going on. So some little earthquake, a few thousand people dead or something, or a tsunami, 250,000 people killed during the Boxing Day tsunamis that hit Sumatra and these areas. They're really small events as to what has happened in the past. So there was great earthquakes recorded at the time of Jesus Christ's crucifixion upon the American continent. This is what we found in the Book of Mormon. So in 3 Nephi 8, it talks about the great events that happened. First of all, verse 2, it says, and it came to pass there was no mistake made by this man in the reckoning of our time. The 30th and 3rd year had passed away. So after 30 and 3 years passed away, we read about the events that occurred. So if we look at 3 Nephi 8 from verse 6, it says, and it came to pass in the 30th that there was a great, let's go to verse 6, and there was also a great and terrible tempest, and there was a terrible thunder, insomuch that it did shake the whole earth as it was about to divide asunder. And there were exceedingly sharp lightnings, such had never been known in all the land. And the city of Zarahemla did take fire, and the city of Moroni did sink into the depths of the sea, and the inhabitants thereof were drowned. And the earth was carried up upon the city of Moroni, that in the place of the city there became a great mountain, and there was great and terrible destruction in the land southward. And behold, there was a more great and terrible destruction in the land northward. For behold, the whole face of the land was changed because of the tempests and the whirlwinds, the thunderings and the lightnings, and the exceedingly great quaking of the earth. And the highways were broken up, and the level roads were spoiled, and many smooth places became rough. And many great and notable cities were sunk, and many were burned, and many were shaken, till the buildings thereof had fallen to the earth, and the inhabitants thereof were slain, and the places were left desolate. Now, if we look at 3rd Nephi and the events that occurred here, it's a type and an example of what's going to happen at Jesus Christ at the opening of the 6th seal. If we look at Jesus Christ's birth, where people take, from 0 BC as being the start of the 6th seal, and then ending at the year 2000. Scriptures always teach about the birth of Christ as joy and peace unto the world and great blessings unto the world. But if we take a look at his crucifixion and what happened after his crucifixion, in the year 33, that's when the destructions occur. That's when we get to 2033, we'll see what happened there. So moving on to chapter 10 of 3 Nephi chapter 10. Chapter 18 reads, "There is silence in the land for many hours, and the voice of Christ promises to gather his people as a hen gathers her chickens. The more righteous part of the people have been preserved." Right? And in verse 2 it says, "For so great was the astonishment of the people that they did cease lamenting and howling for the loss of their kindred which had been slain. Therefore there was silence in all the land for the space of many hours. And it came to pass that a voice came unto the people, and all the people did hear it, and did witness it, saying, O ye people of the great city which had fallen, whose descendants of Jacob, or the house of Israel, how often would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, and would have nourished you." Right, so we see there's a silence, right? There's a great earthquakes, makes a lot of noise, and then there's a silence. And the silence is to get people's attention. The way God gets people's attention is actually through silence, not through great calamities and great destructions. So moving on to quite a well-recorded earthquake event that happened in 1812 on the New Madrid Fault in the US. As many strange things happened during that earthquake. We can just see if I can bring it up here. So the New Madrid Fault basically runs up the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico, you can say, almost all the way up into the Great Lakes. So some of the things happened in 1812. It says 16th of December 1812 to March 1812, there were over 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest, between 6,000 and 10,000 earthquakes in Brothel of Missouri, where the New Madrid is located near the junction of the higher Mississippi River. So it was an extended period of continually quakes, 6,000 of them. That will be, a couple a day to get through all those periods. You go through that timeline. So some of the things that happened, the Mississippi ran backwards. After the February the 7th earthquake, boatmen reported the Mississippi actually ran backwards for several hours. Okay, I'm just losing my place here. It says the force of the land upheaval 15 miles south of the New Madrid created Reefwood Lake, drowned the inhabitants of an Indian village, and turned the river against itself to flow backwards, devastating thousands of acres of virgin forest, and created 2 temporary waterfalls in the Mississippi. Boatmen on floats actually survived this experience and lived to tell the tale. So what happened, there was an uplift of land, pushed the water back, dammed the water up, and the river ran backwards. Getting over the cracks. As the general area experienced more than 2,000 earthquakes in 5 months, people discovered that most of the crevices opened up during the earthquake ran from north to south. When the earth began moving, they would chop down trees in an east-west direction and hold on using the tree as a bridge. There were missing people who were most likely swallowed up by the earth. Some earthquake fissures were as long as 5 miles. Sand boils. The world's largest sand boil was created in the New Madrid earthquake. It's 1.4 miles long and 136 acres in extent, located in the Brothel of Missouri, about 8 miles to the west of Haiti, Missouri. Locals call it the beach. Others, much smaller sand boils, were found in the area. Seismic tar balls. Small pellets up to golf-sized tar balls were found in the sand and fissures. They are petroleum that has been solidified in the petroliferous nodules. Earthquake lights, right? Lights flashed from the ground, causing quartz crystals being squeezed. The phenomenon is called seismoluminescence. Warm water thrown up by earthquakes was lukewarm, as it's speculated that the shaking caused the water to heat up, and or quartz lights heated the water. Earthquake smog. The skies turned dark, and the earthquake so dark that lighted lamps didn't help, right? The air smelled bad, and it was hard to breathe. It's spectacular that it was a smog containing dust particles caused by the eruption of the water into the cold air. Now we read in the Book of Mormon that it became so dark they couldn't create any fire. Well, it's possibly something that happened because of the great earthquake caused the whole area and things to become dark. right? The lamps couldn't even help them see where they were going, or put light on a subject. Loud thunder, sounds of distant thunder and loud explosions accompanied the earthquake. So what we find is, with these great earthquakes, there's a lot of noise and continual booming and loud and cracking. You can actually hear the rocks grinding each other. And that's where the silence comes in. When these grinding and these things stop, that's when you get the silence. All right, going back to our presentation, actually in section 121 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the question asks, how long can rolling waters remain impure? What power shall stay the heavens? As well might man stretch forth his puny arm and stop the Missouri River in its decreed course, or to turn it upstream, as to hinder the Almighty from pouring down knowledge from heaven upon the heads of the Latter-day Saints. So it's an acknowledgement that, yep, these are the works of God. This little animated GIF here shows what a upthrust fault is, and that's what happened in the New Madrid. The land pushed up and shortened, creating lots of cracks everywhere, pushing the water back uphill as well from the Mississippi River. Okay, so that's a short discussion on the earthquakes and the noises and the things that occur. As you can see, those are kind of great earthquakes, but it's nothing like what happened at the time of Peleg or anything that happened during the Book of Mormon, where whole cities over an entire region were destroyed. More than 7 cities were just taken up, completely buried, lost. Some of them caught fire, completely destroyed. And so one of the events in this, the last event in the Sith Seal, is that the lost tribes return, right? 144,000 from all the tribes. In Jeremiah 16 verse 14 says, therefore, behold, the day cometh, saith the Lord, it shall no more be said that the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But the Lord liveth, that brought the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands after he hath driven them. And I will bring them again to their land that I gave unto their fathers. So the event of the return of these 10 lost tribes with their prophets, with their scriptures, will be said it will be greater than what occurred when Moses took the people fleeing from the Egyptians across the Red Sea. In fact, it's such an important event. We actually read in Joseph Smith, when he put the Articles of Faith together, 13 short verses that dictate the teachings of the church and the key things that we believe in as members of the church, right? He included the return of the 10 lost tribes in that. He says, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the 10 tribes, that Zion, the New Jerusalem, will be built upon the American continent, that Christ will reign personally upon the earth, that the earth will be renewed and receive the paradisical glory. The 10 tribes return, New Jerusalem is built on the American continent, and Christ returns. And these are events that need to occur, and as we read, they occur in the Sixth Seal. So this takes us to the last topic. I want to talk about the silence in heaven, right? So we got on our timeline, the first 7,000 years, spiritual creation, and Adam fell out of the Garden of Eden and became mortal, and the earth became a terrestrial state. And we continue with that physical creation, by having children, giving birth, and something like 100 billion acts of sexual intercourse occurring every day. The animals, the birds, insects replenish and multiply the earth. It's part of the physical creation of giving bodies to God's children. We know also, I have a priesthood calling in the ward where I am. I get all these emails from the church headquarters. Just this last, probably 2 weeks back, got an email talking about changes in the standard manuals of the church and in the guidance manuals. And in there, they had some changes relating to birth control. And the key thing that was mentioned there is that the great focus is on bringing children and bringing creating physical bodies for God's children to come down into, right? So we're part of this physical creation. So the Sith Seal events end here 2033, celebrating 2,000 years from the crucifixion of Christ. To have a look at this little thing here. This is a timeline of solar events that are to occur, right? It's a solar eclipse on March the 30th, 2033, April the 14th, 33, a total lunar eclipse, and a partial solar eclipse September and then October, all on holy days over the Easter period, celebrating the 2,000 years since the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And as we know, in the Sith Seal, there'll be great earthquakes, and there'll be tumultuous noises, and there'll be huge things. And then what happens? To get people's attention, there'll be silence in the heavens for a short time, just to acknowledge the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And immediately after that silence in heaven, as we read in Revelations, well, let's just go back quickly to Revelations chapter 7, right? And it says, John sees the sixth seal, the restoration of the gospel, the sealing of the 144,000, and the host of the exalted from all nations. Sixth seal is the restoration of all things. Lost tribes come, most likely the city of Enoch comes back in the sixth seal because it's a restoration of all things. And what it says here in verse 2, and it says, I saw an angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. Then verse 4, and the number that was sealed was 144,000. So what it's saying here, hurt not the earth, neither the things, till we have sealed them. So 110 lost tribes return, tribes from Judah, tribes from Simeon, all the tribes, 12,000 from each tribe. Probably a symbolic number, but safe to say is 12,000 from each tribe, and they get sealed. It says, hurt not the earth till we have sealed them. Now, what is that sealing? The sealing is known to be that they are sealed, priesthood sealing in the temple to protect them against the plagues, against the destructions, against the earthquakes, against the wars that are going to occur, so they can go out and do the missionary work prior to the second coming. Because it says the gospel will be preached to all the earth. As we know, in many parts of the earth today, missionaries are actually being withdrawn, or mostly have withdrawn. Many countries are throwing out the missionaries, China, Russia, and so all this destruction will cause so much chaos that borders will fail, kingdoms will fail, governments will fail, and then the Lord will be able to call in all his servants, seal them against these plagues and against these calamities, and send them out to do missionary work. Then we go across to Revelations 8. When it opened the seal, there was silence in the heavens for space of half an hour. So like in the Book of Mormon, silence from all the grinding, from all the noise, booming from all the earthquakes. A short half an hour of silence, celebrating Jesus Christ, 2,000 years since his crucifixion. And as with the crucifixion, then comes the great destruction, right? Angel came down with incense, poured out their vial. Verse 7, and the first angel sounded, and there were followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees were burnt, and all the green grass was burnt up. And the second angel, and there was fire, and the third part of the sea became blood. So we read in verse chapter 7 of Revelations, it says, hurt not the people, saying, hurt not the earth, until we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Right? And then as soon as The seal opens, the seventh seal, the last period, we're going into that 1,000 years millennium, but just the first little bit prior to the second coming, right? And all third of the green grass is burnt, trees are all destroyed, third of all life in the seas are killed. All right, so going back to our slide here on silence in heaven, I've read to you 3 Nephi 8 already in verse 10, where it talks about there was silence from the earthquakes in the space of a few hours, and then they heard the voice of God, and he appeared unto them. Section 88, let's read about what it says there about the silence. So this is a third witness about the silence. So in section 88 of Doctrine and Covenants 87, as we read already, the earth trembles, the sun hides its face, and there's blood, and the stars cast themselves. All events that occur simultaneously all together, right? There's no such event that has occurred. There's no real great thing. It says, after your testimony cometh indignation of the people. So after the missionary work is withdrawn, after the people have testified, then comes a testimony of earthquakes and the voice of thunderings. These small earthquakes that have occurred since the death of Christ, since the birth of Christ till the year 2000, really they are nothing. They have not occurred together. None of the events can really is testimony. No one recognizes it. No one acknowledges that these are the great earthquakes. So the people that think that all the things in the Sixth Seal have happened, there's nothing that's happened. It's nothing of significance. No one acknowledges it. No one is compared to which is to come. Right, verse 91, and all things shall be in commotion. Surely men's hearts shall fail them, for fear shall come upon all people. Right? We haven't seen fear come upon all people. 92, and the angels shall fly through the midst of heaven, crying with a loud voice, sounding a trump of God, saying, prepare ye, O inhabitants of the earth, for the judgment of God is come. And behold, and lo, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. And immediately there shall appear a great sign in heaven, and all the people shall see it together. Right? These signs will be known. Everyone will see it all together. And then it was a trump, and it'll be the destruction, what he calls her, the mother of abominations. He'll separate the tares from the wheat. Right? As we know, this time period we're living in is very different to any other time period. Where God, Jesus Christ on the earth, he said, right, an enemy came and sowed tares, some weeds amongst the wheat. And he says, pick them not up until the wheat is mature, right? And now it's going to be a separation of people and then a destruction. In the past, just most people just got destroyed. Time of Noah was the whole earth destroyed, other than Noah and his 8 family that were with him on the boat. So after the destruction of the tares and the wheat, verse 95, and there shall be silence in heaven for the space of half an hour. And immediately after, the curtain of heaven be unfolded as a scroll is unfolded and is rolled up, and the face of the Lord shall be unveiled. So here we have another period of silence in heaven. And immediately after that, the Lord returns. So all the earthquakes, all the destruction, the great winds, everything that's occurring on earth, suddenly silence. Get everyone's attention, because that's how God's worked in the past. That's how it worked amongst the Nephites. There'll be silence in heaven for the space of half an hour, and then immediately Jesus Christ will come. So now to people that interpret the silence in heaven to be a 20-year period, now we're looking at a second event of 20 years. It's not how it works, right? The Book of Mormon was just for a few hours. Yeah, it's just for a half an hour to get people's attention. In verse 96, and the saints that are upon the earth who are alive shall be quickened and caught up to meet him. And they who have slept in their grave shall come forth, for their grave shall be opened, and they shall be caught up to meet him in the midst of the pillar of heaven. They are Christ, the first fruits of they who descend with him, and they who are the earth in their graves, who were first caught up to meet him. And all this by the voice of the sounding of the trump, the angels of God. Some people talk about, because Earth going to a terrestrial state, We'll all be translated. There's no point in translation. There's no point in having translated beings, right? It's resurrected beings. All those that were resurrected at Christ, just immediately after Christ's resurrection. We know it's recorded in the Bible that many of the dead rose and spoke to them. It's recorded in the Book of Mormon. Many of the dead rose and spoke to the people. All they will return as resurrected beings. All those on the earth will be quickened, resurrected, brought up to meet Christ in the air, to come down as the earth is. And all those that have died and received the ordinance of the gospel from the restoration of the gospel, basically from the death of Christ, all the way up until the second coming, will be resurrected and meet him in the air, and they will come down and we will live on this earth as resurrected beings. Translation is, or being in a state of translation, is not required. There's no purpose for it. Okay. I've got a little note here. No silence on earth, birthing pains, right? Oi, what's going on here? So, the events leading up to the Sith Seal being released and Jesus Christ returned are referred to as birthing pains. So as a woman in labor, it comes time for the child to be delivered, will start having contractions, and they will be far apart, and after a while contractions will get more powerful, more stronger, and they'll get closer and closer, and they will last longer. And then the child is born. The same thing, the events that are occurring on the earth today, COVID-19, the earthquakes, we've had a large number of flooding, bushfires, economic destruction, rioting in the streets. These are all events leading up to the main event. So when the time of tribulation starts, and the events recorded in the opening chapters where the great earthquakes and the meteorites then pummel the earth. There's no silence currently on earth, right? If we call this silence, 20 years of silence, all these destructions, all these things, that's not silence. It's a preliminary events to prepare us for the things that are to come. So, go to my last slide. So in conclusion, right, the silence in heaven is a short period that occurs on earth, and where the destructions and the great winds stop, the groanings of the earth and the earthquakes stop, for God to get us our attention, and then a great spiritual event happens, right? Jesus Christ appears to the people as he did in the Nephite continent, or he'll be coming back, reading Doctrine and Covenants. Short half an hour on the earth silence, and then he immediately appears unto us. Great and dreadful is that day, and it's great for those that are prepared for it, and dreadful for those that have not prepared. So my last slide here says, don't worry about the world coming to an end today. It's already tomorrow in Australia, right? As in my previous slides, and I talked about all the continents that is coming will eventually become back one again, and the oceans will flee to the north. All you guys up there in the frozen north, with the blue and white stripes and those little Canadian maple leaf flags, whatever, will be coming back down to join us here in Australia. Just remember to bring Zion with you, otherwise you won't be welcome. And I leave this with you, and hope it's been of some value. Please leave comments. This is a great topic. There's a lot to be discussed, and there's much to be learned through it. Amen.